listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, October 25th, 2024.
So it's another week, so it means it's another week where I talk about a TV show with Joe Locke in it.
Yep.
And how obsessed I am. No, I'm sorry, I'm teasing. Although I will say that by this episode playing, no, but by next week we'll have completed Agatha All Along, the airing. I say we, I mean me. Me.
Yeah.
I will undoubtedly want to talk about it, and since Dan has watched 0 episodes,
absolutely zero.
It'll be very exciting as I talk about and say spoiler warning, and Dan says you actually texted all that to me already, so it's okay.
And also, just to make it clear, I don't watch any Disney Marvel stuff because it's too woke.
It's just
yep, that's my problem with it.
I hate you so much for that. But
Anyway, the important thing is that this is the last episode to air before Halloween.
Yes.
And so we have been teasing, we have been planning.
For years,
and we've been tickling.
For years. We've been talking about doing a spooky episode, I think literally for years, and have not done one yet. Do you remember, I think like 10 years ago, we actually did every week something kind of spooky.
When we had ambition and a new website, and maybe just a glint of hope that maybe our show could do something bigger.
Yeah.
But then we got real jobs, and we're like, oh, geez.
And then for years, we always say like, oh, it's a Spooktober.
It's Spookytober, and the joke is we didn't do anything spooky.
Yeah. And so here we are now, finally, years in the making of us agreeing on a spooky shit to do.
And having the gumption to actually follow through.
Yeah, we did. And I want to talk about that before we talk about the thing. I want to talk about the gumption that it took to do this. So we're here to talk about what is considered probably one of the most iconic films of horror. I mean, like top X, right? It's actually, I had to look it up. It is generally considered one of these like top 100, top whatever movies. It is, some have said one of the best movies of the creator's oeuvre.
Right. Someone said that he finally made a sequel that surpassed the original.
Yeah, to surpass a Metal Gear. To surpass a Metal Gear. Sorry, yep. I'm mixing metaphors now. No, and what we're going to talk about is
Zack Snyder's,
George Romero's.
Dawn
of the Dead.
I watched the wrong one.
1978's Dawn of the Dead. By George Romero. Filmed in 1977. It's a sequel to 1968's Night of the Living Dead.
Right.
And it is often, it's discussed as like, oh, this was it is kind of a trend-setting, iconic, big deal movie. And actually, I will say that I had not seen, so I saw the 2004 remake, but I'd actually never seen this version of the film.
Oh, really?
Until this week.
A film that's actually kind of surprisingly hard to find.
And that was actually the thing that surprised me.
Yeah.
Was that when I was like, oh, we'll watch this. And then you said, oh, I watched it. I'm like, oh, cool, let me go watch it. And I'm like, actually, I went to my Apple TV and said, like, I'll whatever it takes, Apple TV, I'll rent it, I'll do it on streaming. Dawn of the Dead, I said. And it said, you mean 2004's Dawn of the Dead? I'm like, no. Dawn of the Dead, 1978. It's like, what's that?
It was. I was really surprised too. Yeah.
And it was this idea that, and that, like, I just couldn't find. I finally texted you, like, dude, how did you watch it? Because I Googled it, and all I got was fucking YouTube, like people putting on YouTube, I guess.
Yeah, and luckily I had this 6-disc 4K Blu-ray release. No, of course not. I rented it on the Amazon.
Right. And I'll say I spoke to a film friend of mine. Who works in film restoration, and he actually had said that like part of it's that this movie's weird, not weird like the original film. Night of the Living Dead was weird because they forgot to copyright it properly.
Right.
This one is weird because it was actually the producer who or maybe it's the whatever. The person who helped fund it, an Italian filmmaker named Dario Argento.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There was an agreement where basically, he'll fund the film, but that he controls all of the international release rights.
Right, and also got the final cut on the international.
Right, release, and so the idea that there's actually two versions of the film: the U.S./domestic cut, which is Romero's film with his music and his whatnot, and then there's the international version, the European, really, I think. Although actually it is international that Argento did.
For those who don't know, like Dario Argento is like a huge film, like a horror filmmaker in his own right. Commonly known for sort of pioneering what's called the Giallo films. Just kind of really like surreal, but also like gross horror film stuff. I haven't seen much, if any of it, but he's a big name. I think he found Romero because they met at some sort of soiree. And Romero's like, I love your stuff, and Argento was like, I love Night of the Living Dead, and then they became besties. I don't know, very strange, but yeah, they came together in a professional capacity for this movie, and created a very strange situation for the distribution of this film.
Which is why I mentioned that, because there are two versions of the film. There's I guess they call it in the U.S. the theatrical version, which is Romero's cut, which not only is it cut differently, it's also the music is from a stock music library, where there's the international version, which Argento did, which I think is sometimes distributed as the director's cut, which is funny because it's not. It's the producers or executive producer's cut. But it actually features music from, I looked this up, from his frequent collaborator, Goblin, which I'm assuming is a band.
No, that was the music in the version I watched too. But the length of the film I watched was
I mean, because I think
it was in the credits as I watched the film. I was like,
oh no, I think it's in the credits for both, but I don't think it actually was, because that I was by the end of the film, I'm like, oh, this is actually just
bad music. Yeah, it's very bad.
So what a weird situation, and actually to the point where, despite having watched the film literally in the last day, a part of me wants to be like, oh, I kind of want to see this other version, because my friend who's into film said that, like, oh no, the European cut is cut better. Like it's the cuts are better. And it's weird enough, especially with the different music and everything else, that like it might be just a slightly different film. I don't know, but we both watched the same version, the one that you can currently get on Amazon, and that's what we're here to talk about.
The question I just want to quickly start with, just as not even as a deep conversation, but long ago for this very program, we watched Night of the Living Dead, and we're quite impressed with it. Specifically, like the themes and the sort of like whatever the liberal message of it, despite being still very depressing and cynical. One of the things I went into watching this movie was the idea that people were saying, oh, this is one of the few times when the creator made a better movie than the original. Because there's no doubt that Dawn of the Dead is a seminal piece of zombie fiction and influenced a lot of media. So in your opinion, and I'll give mine afterwards, do you think Dawn of the Dead, well, let's just say, do you like Dawn of the Dead more than Night of the Living Dead? There's no wrong answer.
It's weird because, I've seen both Nights of the Living Dead. Mm-hmm. They're different.
They are.
I don't actually think. I don't actually. There are parts of this movie I actually think are great. And I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say it's a bad movie. I don't. Are
you a politician? Because you're really dodging the question here, my friend.
No, I don't actually. And of course, Dan knows like some of the things I texted while watching it. Mm-hmm. And then Dan sent me text back. I was like, well, yeah, that's also true. I think it's actually weird where while the like some of the themes and the idea of Dawn of the Dead, I think are actually better than Night of the Living Dead. I like just the commentary of them stopping in a mall and like the kind of weirdness of that. I think that part is better. I think Dawn of the Dead has more what's the word I'm looking for? Junk in the trunk? No, that sounds positive. Like it's 2 hours and 20 minutes. I think 2:15. I think. And that's
not to pump the zombie metaphor here a bit more. It's a bloated movie.
Yeah, it I would say that like it really has like a lot of too much in some places.
And in some places I think it works, in others it doesn't.
Yeah, and so I think my takeaway is actually this is a movie I watched it. I'm like, wow, there's things I like, but also this movie could use a director's cut.
Right. There's some really sharp commentary that goes on in Dawn of the Dead. But I think as a movie, I prefer Night of the Living Dead. Even though it has less of a budget, even though it's very the scenes are obviously showing, I think it's a much more cohesive and like focused statement as a piece of I don't want to say literature, but film. What I do like about Dawn of the Dead, and we'll get into some of this, is that it really does feel. I think when the movie is firing on all cylinders, it is really an evolution of what Romero started talking about in Night of the Living Dead in terms of race relations, in terms of state overreach, in terms of police versus civilians. Right. What I will say is that I do recognize that Dawn of the Dead is probably more of a cultural touchstone. I think it is more influential maybe than Night of the Living Dead in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And it is where I think this is the split where you see people really we talked about this last week or the week before. It's this movie that people started misinterpreting zombie fiction and to becoming a libertarian dream or and missing sort of the point, right? Yes.
Okay, I get that. I like because actually that was one of my thoughts. Is I've railed so hard into how zombie narratives are like this.
I don't need to know your kinks here. I know you're into zombies now, but I didn't know you're into
libertarian
zombies.
Fantasy,
railing into zombies.
But the idea that this is one where watching it and seeing what it's doing, you can see it where like some people watched it and thought like, oh, you're right. There are going to be weird motorcycle gangs that are going to try to ruin everything.
Just clearing out a mall full of dead people, right? I was really excited to watch this movie again, not only because we actually get to do a Spookytober thing, but it's a movie that, especially with your recent dive into zombie fiction again, like, oh, I remember this movie and it'd be fun to it's going to be fun to watch. And I remember there's like a weird progression where I tried to find where I could watch the movie, found it, and was like, whoa, that's really long. Then, like, let's just do it. Let's rent it. And starting it up and going like, I know what to expect this movie. It's a movie about people clearing a mall full of zombies. And it is, but then the movie keeps going. And it was just, watching it this time really, mm-hmm. I don't know whether it's because I'm older now, maybe a little bit wiser, but it's a much different movie than I remember it being. We were talking about this before we started recording, or before we went on air. I thought it was basically Dead Rising, the movie. And yes, but that's like half an hour of the movie, right? Mm-hmm. What impressed me about it was that it is still, it does really feel like a natural evolution of the themes and the ideas and the scenarios that Romero was hinting at and touched on in Night of the Living Dead, of like,
right,
what would people do in a certain situation, but also if the situation continued being a zombie apocalypse, how would people find a sense of normalcy, right? Of what can life be like if you can have a life in a world like this? And I was really impressed on this watch through of what he was doing with that, which was also part of what slowed the movie down. But I think in these moments of actually investigating people trying to be normal, really, I think helped the movie and the message he was getting across. But I want to get too far ahead of myself, because I think and relevant to the texts we were having with each other, I want to start at the beginning because I think the first two scenes of this film are staggering in their message and in their display. Right?
I started watching the movie. I was like, "Oh, yikes!"
Like, there's so much to talk about. We could do an entire show just about those opening two scenes. But of those, let's just start chronologically. Like, I really found interesting how he started the movie, which is just in utter chaos. It's like a television news show, talk show kind of thing, right?
Right. And I would admit, when I started watching it, I was so confused because I was like, "Where's the shopping mall?"
right. And then
somebody who'd never seen it but knew what it was about, I was like, "Where's the shopping mall?"
And then time keeps going on. You're like, "Where is the shopping mall?"
It's like 40 minutes in. Where is the shopping mall? Anyway.
But yeah, it starts with this sort of like television discussion TV show, and it's just chaos. Because news reports are coming in, which is the news reports were a really important and interesting part of Night of the Living Dead. But here they're like they're picking up that thread from the original movie and kind of starting with that. It's basically showing what people do in a time of crisis.
Right.
I found it very harrowing, that opening scene, because it kind of felt like, oh, I've seen this in real life.
Well, it's a weird thing to watch this film and be like, oh, yeah.
Because for those that haven't seen it, I would recommend stopping and watching it. It's basically these two hosts or a host and a guest trying to talk about this zombie apocalypse. But like everybody in the newsroom there's news coming in and people are yelling at each other all the time. And then they're also like the staff are like yelling at the people that are trying to actually have a conversation for this TV show, and like people walking around like putting bunny ears behind the hosts as they're filming and recording. It's a chaotic scene where I don't think I rewound it a couple times because I felt like I missed something. But I think the point of that scene is that it's just
chaos.
it's absolute static, right? And so because of that, no communication is actually happening. And what happens to relationships, what happens to communities when the noise is so loud, you can't communicate. In hindsight, and a lot of part of this movie is like, in hindsight, I really am impressed with what Romero pulled off here. But it's as a way to start a movie, I don't know if I'd recommend it, but it's really impressive artistically.
Well, and it's such a weird thing because it starts there, right, with like this chaos in a newsroom or a TV studio, and we basically pull out of that. Oh, these two characters are going to flee together in a helicopter because one is like he's the news chopper traffic guy, and he's gonna flee in the chopper. Oh, like, okay. And I think for me, it's then it cuts to suddenly a completely different scene. Like we're watching, like, what is this? A raid on an apartment building?
Yeah.
Like the cops are taking, like, and I was like, oh wow, it's Seattle. It's not. I think it's Philadelphia. I think it is. But like, and it suddenly, and it has really, like, oh, these cops are raiding this building that's essentially, populated mostly by, I think it's supposed to be Puerto Ricans, I think they say.
Yeah. That one guy makes it clear that it's Puerto Ricans.
I think the text actually said while watching this was like, oh, big yikes, brown face, because at least one person is clearly just a white dude painted brown, I think. Like, oh, look, he's Puerto Rican because he's brown.
Not the last time that happens in this movie. But what tells me is that Romero needs more brown friends or needs to find more brown actors. Not necessarily him trying to pull one over on people.
Yeah, it was just that, like, he wanted to make a point, and it's like apparently couldn't find a Puerto Rican actor or a Hispanic Latino actor. Sure. But it's this weird thing where it's like, yet we're still in this, like, this end of days apocalypse scenario, and somehow it's now like the cops and the National Guard raiding an apartment building.
Are we even clear why they're doing it, aside from just like...
So I actually did not know why. I did not understand it, and then I went and I read the Wikipedia because I was like, I like read a summary.
The bastion
according to the
truth.
summary, well, I mean, at this point, yeah. So if I believe the summary in Wikipedia, it's because they're not turning out their dead. That there's like a government edict to turn out your dead so they can take them away and dispose of them, but these people didn't. Which is that part is clear in the movie where they get to the basement, like, oh no, we did the last rites. Don't worry, they're all in the basement. And it's like, okay, but that's not the problem, son.
yeah. Oh, it's
you know. Ooh. And so it's such a weird scene to be like this kind of like the social collapse, and part of it's you realize that like and honestly, I think about this a lot, that like as society collapses due to a zombie apocalypse, there are communities that already might have been mistrusting of the government who are now like, oh, government, you're telling me to do X. I'm not going to do that. And there's probably someone could say like, oh, you mean like get a vaccine? Like, yes, I get it. Like there's a whole fucking narrative here that is like, okay, these make sense. Like, I get it. And also I guess that's what I thought of. It's like, oh shit, this is although it's couched in the cultural side, because now it's not the Puerto Ricans who aren't getting vaccinated. But that idea that like when things are actually falling apart and the government tries to do its job, perhaps poorly, the idea that people will mistrust it and then make things worse. Which I think that was what a weird scene to watch. And you're like, and what the fuck does this have to do about a shopping mall, right?
Right.
I wondered too.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's an interesting contrast, those two scenes, because it goes from figurative to literal, right? Of like, let's discuss whether this whole pandemic is real or not, and make fun of the people we don't believe, which is what happens in like the TV thing, to the point where it does become nihilistic. People just up and walk out, right? And like, hey, security guard, stop that guy from leaving. The security guy's like, who cares, right? And so we're seeing like for lack of a better word, a white collar fallout of a pandemic here. It's like people just choosing to trust or not trust a specific point of view. Cut to a raid on an apartment building. Right. To the point where you forget this is a zombie movie. It's like one of these guys is a raging racist, and he seems to be in charge.
Well, and that was actually the bit. There's that one guy who's like the one cop who's a raging racist.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, this is a movie about that. I thought it was about zombies. Right. We haven't seen a zombie yet.
And then a head explodes.
And then zombies arrive.
It's what's kind of interesting, I think, especially in relation to a lot of zombie media we see nowadays, is that this movie lingers on the fall of civilization rather than being about afterwards, right? I feel like in the show The Walking Dead, like and video games like The Last of Us, I guess the show to an extent, but like the fall happens quickly. We get that done in the first half of the first episode. But this movie is like, let's make that 2 hours and 20 minutes long.
Well, but what I would say is that, in the long run here is it's his movie series that Night of the Living Dead is not is the onset.
Good point.
Then we have the fall, and then we have Day of the Dead, I believe, which is the
next one, yeah,
which is the how do we deal with it, and then we have Land of the Dead, which is the aftermath.
Yeah.
So, like, I think whether he intended to or not, he told his story one chapter, one movie at a time, and didn't linger on any one part too long.
Yeah,
too long.
Look forward to Fortnite of the Dead. Oh, actually, he probably wouldn't be able. He'd be sued by
Epic Games.
Yeah, by Epic Games.
He's also dead.
George Romero died.
Well, I mean, he might still be walking around. You never know with that guy,
right? I mean, talk about a contingency plan. But yeah, then there's a hard turn in the apartment raid of like, oh yeah, zombie movie, and it gets bitterly violent and bitterly is that the right word? But let's just say it, but bitterly and shockingly racial, because it's just cops killing a bunch of black people, but they are zombies, but like it's a bunch of black, right?
And what this leads to is, because we have our kind of the character we sort of maybe understand to be
he has
one of our main characters.
Yeah.
And we see him with so he shoots. My recollection is he shoots the very racist guy.
Because he's going on a tear. Yeah, he's going
on a tear. He's like,
mode,
no, I have to like put this out of control guy down. But it's weird because we see him, and then he meets now what we discover later is our other main character, another cop who is black, and the two of them are kind of like sitting there like. And it's that weird scene where they're just standing there like, wow, shit's fucked.
Yeah.
Like is the conversation of like, shit's fucked. And then, oh, by the way, my friend with a helicopter's coming. Do you want to come?
Yeah.
And it's what a weird, like, I mean, there's more to it, to that scene.
Of course,
but it is like, oh, yeah, all right. You seem like an okay guy. Do you want to get the fuck out of here?
So, what do you think? Obviously, it introduces the characters, but these two opening scenes act as like a weird tone poem, right? They're so chaotic and so frenetic, and don't really kind of get narrative traction towards the end of the scene. And it is all setting up the mall stuff. This is me getting sort of English major with it, but like, do you think, and especially since we talk about how this movie is long, do you think this movie needs those opening scenes? Or do you think we could have just started with cops at a mall?
I want to say, for me being someone who like wants to be highbrow about zombie literature, I actually think, yes, the movie needs them both to bookend the fall of society.
Sure, yeah.
Right? Maybe they could have been shorter, maybe they could have been whatever, but I actually think both of those scenes. And I'll be honest with you, it's been 20 years since I saw the 2004 Dawn of the Dead, but I don't remember it having any sort of shit like that.
Me neither. I'm actually maybe
it's all about
curious.
the mall.
Yeah, is it? I don't. Yeah,
that's my memory. Is it's all about the mall. So for me, the idea that this actually there is a we see like the two different sides of collapse, and also we see a few other like it is this story of like how things are going badly. And that leads us to our characters as they're like escaping. That I think is super important. It's not just, oh, they woke up in a mall, whatever.
Right.
It is that
they spawned in a mall. Yeah.
We're watching society collapse. And that's what gets us to then when they land at the mall and then decide to stay, and everything that happens after that is because they all came here from the chaos one way or the other of the world collapsing. So actually, no, I'm gonna actually lean hard into this movie needs that. It could have been shorter or done differently, but it's actually absolutely important to how then we get them there in the mall. The four of them, putting on fancy clothes at the closing, or whatever, right? Like
it's an effective example of world building in a lot of ways. Something that in Night of the Living Dead, all we really get of that is through, I think we get a little bit of TV stuff and mostly like radio stuff. It's just kind of stuff in the background, even in a lot of scenes where the main characters are talking over it. And so it's an interesting choice for Romero to like, let's lean into this. We have a budget. Let's put the cameras in that TV station, in that apartment building, to exploit the narrative opportunity and thematic opportunity that those provide.
And I'm going to say that I think to a certain extent, I mean, it's half the movie is watching society collapse, but through specific like lenses or perspectives. Because here's the thing, right? We see the newsroom falling apart. We see the cops raid the apartment building with the National Guard. That falls apart. As they escape, we also see a group of cops stealing a boat to get the fuck out.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We see
I forgot about that. Yeah.
when they fly over like a bunch of essentially I think what they say is hillbillies with guns, shooting zombies.
Wild.
Right.
That's also a wild scene. That whole just like them looking at stuff.
Right. It's so we see like this like there's a whole like that's like it's almost the first half of the movie.
Yeah.
Is you're seeing the slow collapse of society. That then leads to these people like, hey, we land at this mall and this is where we go from here.
Right.
And to a certain extent maybe helps dictate what they do when they get there, right? They've literally all watched different flavors of society collapse. And actually we even have the bit where I forget where, maybe it's when they first get to the mall, but they're like watching like what TV is left.
Yeah.
There's like the weird scientist and stuff, like the guy credited as a scientist
the eye patch,
with the patch. And the idea that's like we're seeing, it's all falling apart, right?
But it's slow, much like zombies, right?
Right. It could have been. Here's 5 minutes at the front end that says, and then shit went shitty. Right.
A scrolling text. Yeah.
But he actually, like, Romero rolls that out, like, real slow. But
real slow,
I would say, like, but I don't think that was a bad thing. I actually think that's part of, for me, where the movie, again, maybe you could have done it a little bit better here or there, but, like, that's actually part of the story.
Right.
Dawn of the Dead is literally the dawn of the dead, you know? Like, we're watching... Morning in America.
Right. One of the things that kind of, the terms or ideas that really kept popping up for me as I was watching this, and I think really crystallizes, or starts, I should say, starts with that flyover, them watching, local sheriffs like pick off zombies, is the mundane, right? This movie is kind of about the mundane and what is mundane in a world that's falling apart.
Right.
And so, like, watching sheriffs or like state police just like sharing cigarettes and having barbecues, right? As
while they're shooting fucking people in the
shooting zombies, right? Possibly reanimated bodies of those they loved or those they knew, right? Just picking them off as if they were targets in a field, right? And and there were targets in a field. After they we're not going to walk through each plot beat here, but like they get to them all and a big chunk of the movie is them clearing it out of zombies so that they have this basically a safe house that's a mall. And the main characters, 3 of them, is that right?
4 of them. Well,
there's 4 of them initially, right, yeah.
There's Peter, there's Peter the cop, Flyboy, Fly Girl. They have names, but whatever. Flyboy and Fly Girl, and then the other cop, whose name I forget because
we could look this up.
Maybe he doesn't make it to the end.
Maybe.
Then again, I guess only a few people make it to the end.
Right, but what I found really interesting is like after my memory is they get to somehow quickly they get to the mall and the movie is mostly them killing a bunch of zombies to clear them out, and then once all the zombies are dead, they walk up to the roof where they find where they brought up a bottle of champagne. The sun rises, the cork pops, and then credits. Right, that's what I thought this movie was going to be, and then like that's like a third of it.
Yeah.
Because once they clear the zombies out, and literally clear the zombies out, we even get a whole scene of them picking up bodies and getting rid of them. Right? It's fascinating how much time he spends on just them doing stuff that isn't just hardcore, cool action. But then they just there's like I guess it's a montage of like the couple tries to set up a house and home. And they like try to set up routines. It's them like
now trying to live in this new world.
But they're living in a diorama, right? That's the thing. It's like they've walled off the entrances of the mall.
Whatever it is,
the
mall itself, and they've also like walled off their safe room,
right? And are just trying to live a normal life, but. The best part is, and I think this is an interesting commentary, it's like trying to ignore what's going on around you and living the ideal quote unquote 1950s nuclear home lifestyle. Like that's just ignoring the reality of what's going on around you, right? And which is it's a powerful statement, and especially when set in a zombie scenario,
right? And to be clear, it's like. It's clear they're not ignoring what's going on because they take all these steps.
They do,
to make sure they're safe, but also they're ignoring what's going on because then they like try to just live like, haha, this is our new life now.
Right.
We just live in a mall. Nothing's gonna go wrong,
Right.
I would say that the part of the movie that, in retrospect, looking back, is the one that stands out. I'm gonna say it's like a part of the movie. You asked like, could we skip it? I actually think they spend a lot of time, and I get why they do this, on we're going to secure the mall by stealing trucks and parking them in front of the doors.
Oh, dude, that takes so much time.
It takes so much time, and it didn't need to. Really, because what it leads to is that one of the characters essentially his demise begins.
Yeah.
But like, okay, but it goes so long of like driving trucks back and forth.
Is
and
that
this
Steven
is actually
or Roger, the guy that gets...
Steven is is Flyboy.
Is that Flyboy? Okay,
it's
so
Roger.
it's Raj, yeah.
Yeah. So it's that thing where, like, for up until now, I actually thought, like, oh, everything kind of makes sense. And then, like, we're going on this protracted, like, stealing trucks and stuff. And, like, okay, cool. Oh, back and forth, back. And it's like, okay, I didn't need to see this 4 times or whatever it is. And then ends just with, like, oh, and then that sucked. Like, and that was the first time I thought, like, this probably didn't need to be that long. Like, you could have just, and we secured it,
shown 2 buses, just do the
right. Just make it happen, make it done, and then reveal that someone has a bad time. But I will still say, like, it was still, there's some interesting stuff there, because it's the idea that they make their home safe, and then that's where we get to what Dan thought was the start of the movie, which is we kill some zombies.
Yeah.
And then make our little weird, quaint homes,
But even the clearing out of the zombies in the mall there's a routine, a mundane routine to it. It's like, oh, we figured out how to open this door. You need to have these keys. We're going to open the door and slide in this wheelbarrow so we can move stuff out. And like they go back and forth through that pivoting door in that department store,
right, where they like
15 times. And it's like, do we need to see all this? But also, it's like it's part of the message, I think. And like as we keep talking about this, I'm like, maybe we can't cut this part out. Maybe we can't cut this part out. But like it is a slog. But also, that's the question I keep asking. Well, is that the point, right? Which is a big bet to make for a sequel for a 10-year-old movie that was an underground sensation,
right? And I do think that at this point, once we get to we've secured the doors and that the clearing part, I do think that gets into the sort of like we're in the mall, because then it becomes this kind of like, hey, they're in the mall with all the stuff they could ever want, right? And people always say, like, there's this very like critique of modern,
consumerism and capitalism,
consumerism and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that narrative starts here.
Yeah.
1 hour, 20 minutes.
It kind of becomes like a John Hughes movie. It was like, oh, it's the Brat Pack trapped in a mall that no one else is in, right? What kind of hijinks will they get up to for a quick minute, right? Oh, and then zombies.
And then biker gang,
Yeah. So that's the thing. I keep coming back to this idea of like of a celebration or a critique of the mundane, or how dangerous trying to seek mundanity can be, because it's ignoring the essential problem, which is the world is dying. But also, you can wall off everything around you, but that keeps zombies out, but it doesn't keep, the problem out. And the problem, as is kind of the case with The Walking Dead, right? The Walking Dead aren't the zombies, it's the people. In this case, the problem in a post-zombie apocalypse world is not necessarily the zombies, because they can easily outrun them. 4 people can clear out a mall full of zombies relatively easily. But greed and rapacious need, it takes a bit more effort,
right?
And that easily breaks the routine, the new normal that they establish in the mall.
I do really love that at the end of the day, I don't think I actually put that. I would not have put that sentence together. It's the zombies you can keep out. It's greed and rapacious need that, in fact, is what you can't keep out.
Rapacious need is not going to be the name of the episode.
No, it's not. No, that won't trend well on YouTube.
Probably not. Yeah,
but no, I mean, I do think this movie does a lot of things really interestingly. Like I really liked a lot of it. I mean, it's too long.
It's a long movie. Yeah.
And again, I don't need fucking 20 minutes of trucks or
20 minutes of 20 minutes of a biker gang, which they're basically just doing slapstick comedy. Like, here's a pie in the face.
And we haven't talked about the biker gang, right? So the idea that like these villains show up, and clearly they're raiders, right? Like,
were some of them former police officers? I feel like I recognize some of those people from the beginning of the movie. I don't know if that's intended. I actually think I think the joke is that half of them are the friends of George Romero. One of them is Tom Savini, the makeup artist, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say one of them is Tom Savini. So it is just a lot of like, hey guys, I need some people, you know.
Yeah. But do we have to be Puerto Rican?
They may look familiar because they were in another movie that he made.
Right,
you know?
right.
Wow, is that the guy from this other movie? Like, well, yes, it is. But that, like, this idea that they show up and them showing up and the conflict that ensues, because really it's like this gang shows up and they just are there to like steal shit, right? Like, although, and I love like the triviality of it. They're stealing like gold and jewels and cash.
Well, there's the one guy that's really concerned about his health.
Well, don't be. We'll get to that guy. But the idea that they're going around and like the bad part, like the slapstick or whatever aside, which we can talk about. The idea that these guys show up and they're just like they're stealing things that you would steal if society was still up, right, and functioning. Like literally, there's a part where they're raiding the bank,
right.
And they're like throwing cash in the air, and like that's just at this point that's toilet paper. Like that's not.
Right.
There's
you
no
should be stealing
value
bottle caps. We know
right.
this.
You should. I mean, like, and that's for someone who now plays too many zombie games. I'm like, motherfuckers, you need to be stealing food, bullets, and survival supplies. Like, why are you taking jewels? Yeah. Right? Like, oh, someone may like no, they're because that's that idea that like in this collapse of society, people are still like going to these these weird instincts of like, I want money. And it's like
status quo, right? Yeah.
But money doesn't do you anything here, right? Like, as it ends up, there's no bank that'll take that money now, right?
right.
But then we get to the weirdness of the scene where suddenly there's also a lot of like weird jokes, right? Like suddenly we're seeing these guys like smashing pies in the face of zombies.
Yeah.
I mean, just keeps going, and you're like, what was this about? Like, what do I need that?
It's the only time I felt like there might have been studio meddling, but I don't think that was the case. It was just George Romero going like, I think we need something funny here.
Actually, I texted as the scene played. I paused it, I rewound it, I watched it again, rewound it, watched it again, then texted you. Why is it that some guy stops to get his blood pressure taken while he's surrounded by zombies? And I don't know. I think maybe the gag is supposed to be that he falls into the chair and his arm goes in the strap. But no, it really looks like he just stopped to get his fucking blood pressure taken.
Yeah, no, that's
while
how
being chased by zombies.
Yeah,
and weirdly enough, he gets disemboweled and torn apart, and then. Let's break some belief. Let's kill the verisimilitude.
This is where it breaks.
It says that his blood pressure is too high. Like, dude, there's no heart attached to that arm anymore.
Well, maybe he's wearing his heart on his sleeve, Andrew.
That blood pressure should be too low. And that kind of becomes the weird end of the. And there's definitely like still commentary because like these raiders raid the mall. And we have the two main characters at this point, Steven Flyboy and Peter.
Francine. Oh, yeah, Peter.
And Francine, but Francine's like hiding in the house. And the idea that they're kind of like, look, they're not here for us. They're just going to steal stuff. I think that's actually what Peter says. And then Steven like has this weird like libertarian like.
Oh wait,
get
Roger's
off my
the
land.
cop. Roger's the cop.
Well, Roger's
Steven's
dead.
Flyboy. Yeah.
Well, Roger's dead, right?
Oh yeah.
Peter's the cop that's still alive. So Steven basically like they're all get off my land is basically what he like goes into like this rage of like I'm going to shoot these intruders, which again I guess it's welcome to America. And while that part I think it has value or is of interest, but then they mix it in with like smashing pies and heart pressure jokes and whatever else. Blood pressure jokes, not heart pressure. Sorry.
Get that.
So it's a weird ending, and that's like 20 minutes of ending. By the way,
it's a long time. Yeah, and what's interesting about it, if we're going to go into like, okay, George Romero is a raging liberal. What I also find interesting is I think that raider scene, the biker gang scene, is also. In addition to that flyover scene where we see like the barbecue shootout of the lumbering zombies, that's like, oh, this is where the libertarian, wet dream started as well. Right. But what's funny is if you look at these scenes as being the seed that planted that vein or that I guess that branch of zombie fiction, if you actually watch the scene, it's juvenile. Mm-hmm. It's immature. Immature is the word I'm looking for. And these people aren't cool. They think they're cool, but they're not. And what they're doing is actually ruining, quote unquote, the something good that these 4 people had worked hard to create. Even if that itself was some facsimile of something that couldn't last very long either.
Right.
But it seems like a really good contrast. Man, my English major is coming out talking about this. A comparison between maturity and immaturity, and actually in a world where shit's getting real, like neither works, neither survives, and neither will protect you, right? I actually, now that I'm thinking, like, what is the message he's trying to say about this? It's more, I guess, maybe more about a balance, but it's saying something that I need to think more about it. I'm like, holy crap.
Well, it's for me, because, it's so like, part of me wants to, I've not seen Day of the Dead. Mm-hmm. I think it's the one I haven't. Well, actually, all the weird ones.
I heard that's even more like just of a drag, but
it has production issues and everything else. But to me, there is something I think interesting that he's doing. Mm-hmm. More, and I would say like different than a lot of other zombie narrative.
Yeah.
Especially American zombie narrative, because some of the other stuff may be different, but I like how much that idea of the libertarian wet dream. Mm-hmm. I always think a lot about that, because I don't think that's what he was not trying to tell you. It's the way to win is to be a shithead.
He's saying this is bad.
It's all it's bad, and yeah.
Well, and I think going back to those opening scenes is like, what matters is, mature or immature. What matters is listening to each other, right? And preserving humanity, which is both the mature aspect of it and the immature, right? That goes back to when once they got the mall secure, they're being, like I said, they're being John Hughes teenagers having fun, and like it's fine because they're not hurting anybody, but like. There's the other side of that of just devolving into hedonism, which is what the biker gang is doing, right?
Well, to a certain extent, the 4 of them do that on their own, right?
For sure.
Like, getting all the fancy clothes and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. But it's also sweet, right? There's like the dinner scene, right, where Peter makes dinner
makes Stephen and Franny dinner.
Yeah,
and actually that was like this really like totally unexpected. Like he makes some dinner. He's like, oh no, it's for you guys. I'm gonna go do something else.
My first thought was like, I don't trust that meat.
It was just it was this kind of neat,
Yeah.
Oh, like they're trying to find something, and they're like, for people who didn't know each other when they first met, right? The idea that. I mean, honestly, Peter met Roger, and at that point, spoiler, Roger didn't make it. The idea that they've come together as like a community, a family, if you will, and they're making do, and they're figuring out what they need to do, how they need to develop. I mean, I also like the fact that we have now a movie with a cast of 4 basically. We have 2 white dudes, a woman, and a black man. Mm-hmm. And they're all like, that's actually like, I mean, the proportions are shockingly different than most films of the time. I immediately thought of Star Wars. It's like, oh wow, they've got their main cast has an infinity % more black men than Star Wars did.
Right. As did Night of the Living Dead 10 years earlier,
and it's
right.
And I love the fact that like everyone says like they credit that film with like, oh man, you put a black actor into this main role, mm-hmm. and it was really important. And they said like, well, and Romero said like, well, he just did the best read for the part. Right. And at this point, I Googled it like, wait, is this his thing? Does Romero just cast black men in lead roles? And there's a whole article I read about like, actually, yes. Although whether it's intentional or not, his movies tend to be like one of the main characters is a black man. Although I joked with you that in Land of the Dead, the iconic, formative black man is in fact a zombie. However, he's also like one of the main characters of the film, and that's a discussion for. I think did we talk about that? No, we didn't
briefly, but we didn't focus on it. Maybe next year we could do a Land of the Dead rewatch. That'd be fun.
But no, it's an interesting thing. And then the idea that Franny, the woman, starts out kind of
really good character. I would also say,
I'd say she starts out like kind of like not inept, but like is kind of not necessarily she's kind of there because she's the girlfriend,
right.
But then, like, at one point, she's like, "Well, you need to teach me to fly this helicopter.
You need to teach me how to shoot, right? Like, yeah, right. And she becomes incredibly capable, especially at the end, right, where she
at the end of the film, it's literally her now, like, kind of, I'm the one who's escaping. No, and it is, and she's, you know, and of course we see Steven Flyboy kind of lose his mind to rage and then die.
Yeah.
So it is. Actually, wait a second. Is it that the two men that die of the four members are both of their deaths based in hubris?
Probably.
Or
yeah.
Because, like, right, it's Steven is him, like, oh, get off my land, this is my house. And, like, he basically starts shooting at these people he didn't need to. And then Rogers is like the arrogance of
the truck. Yeah.
The truck thing.
The woohoo. I'm just like, he's like, he wants to, like, run across the heads of zombies to get, you know, like, he's very, very what do you call it? Like, daredevil-y kind of idea.
Like Cowboy Energy.
Yes.
That ends poorly. I don't know. And this is actually the thing also where, you know, we're sitting here ascribing a lot of, like, big-headed thought.
Even you can be an English major, Andrew.
And who knows what fucking George Romero was doing. He may be just like, I really love bloody people.
I will say, Steven, the actor played Steven, his performance as a zombie, that is like... I feel like there's something weird. I feel like, oh, that's a zombie. Otherwise, it was like the movie was like people with their arms out in front of them and kind of like bumping into things and falling over. But like, oh, he's like got the crooked foot and he's like dragging stuff. I'm like, this guy knows what he's doing.
His foot, right?
Yeah,
right.
But he's also like he's selling it. Like he looked like a modern zombie, whereas everybody else just felt like the friends they hired.
There are a lot of people who are just like their arms are out and they got makeup.
Right. The one thing, kind of to go into the nerdy aspect of it here, and I don't have a lot to say about this, was as I was watching this, the question that came up about like zombie lore was like, oh, where did the idea of like the bite turns you into a zombie come from?
I have no idea.
Yeah. And here, it's
here.
Not really. Like, these people die because they were attacked by zombies, but it's not explicitly said like, oh, the bite is what infected me.
Right. Because in Night of the Living Dead, which is ostensibly a prequel, it's just that the dead are coming to life. Mm-hmm. It's not, there's not a virus or whatever. In this movie, it is very clear that like people die and then come back, right? Because that was actually like, that's the whole apartment scene where like, oh no, we all are dead. We just put them in the basement and did last rites and like, uh-oh, there are zombies now. You know, and I think we see with Roger, he does get bit and then he survives, although he's not doing well. With Steven, he actually gets shot and then he gets bit after that. And then, you know, like, but I guess if you watch this and didn't know, it's easy to interpret that they became zombies because they were bit. But that is not, I think that's not the intent. That's not, you know, Romero's zombies, it's always just all the dead come back, which is actually, I will say, Walking Dead essentially does the same thing. Right. Although they do argue that being bit makes it faster. But that like, no, all dead come back. That is the problem. It's weird though, because actually I think by Night of the Living or by Dawn of the Dead, the remake, it is explicitly being bitten.
Interesting.
Is my memory.
Are we going to force ourselves to watch that too?
I mean, yeah, at some point I will. No, it's a weird thing that at some point, and maybe it's because Romero never really, I mean, I think in the Night of the Living Dead, they say something, a comet, right? Like there's a comet that flies by and that's what makes everyone come back. To the point where I
forgot about that.
I read, and I haven't seen it, but they say at the end of Day of the Dead that the comet goes away. So like the dead stop rising after Day of the Dead, except now there's millions of them have already risen, right? Because like the whole thing in Night of the Living Dead is that like they're pulling themselves out of graves, right? These are dead from long dead people that are coming back to life. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I could see if you saw this movie without context, you would say, oh, look, it's the people that get bit that come back. But no, actually lots of people come back, right? That's people come back. It's of the dead. So I don't know. part of me wants to actually do research on that. I bet you if you look it up really hard, you'll find out that the guy that made sequels to Night of the Living Dead that isn't George Romero, I bet those movies probably have Getting Bitten as part of it. Because who knows, right?
I not to go back to what I said earlier, like, I think in hindsight, this movie is better than in the moment. But it's really interesting, and it's a really interesting movie that I think is doing a lot for the medium, obviously, or it wouldn't have been so influential. But like, I think the things we remember it for, the mall, the just tearing through zombies, like the scene of them just plowing through zombies in that little sedan with the guy hanging out the back of the car as they were going to lock the doors and stuff like that. That's the stuff that I think culture remembers. But in terms of what Romero might have been trying to do, hope in theory was trying to do, and saying with the film, I think it's really impressive. And yes, it's too long. Yes, sort of stuff probably should have been cut. And who knows? And now I'm also really interested to see what was cut in the European release or the worldwide release. But also, I think a lot of the drag is part of the point, right? And man, it's for a zombie movie where in lower video quality the zombies look like they're blue. It's a pretty damn good movie.
Yeah. No, like I will say, I enjoyed watching it, other than the fact that it was very long and I had to stop and go to sleep and wake up later and finish it. Luckily, I got a good stopping point when the gang appears. I think it's actually this is a movie that defined a genre along with its prequel. But I think to a certain extent, rightfully so.
Yeah, for sure.
I will say I Googled it, and I just want to add that David Emge, who played Stephen Flyboy, he died earlier this year. Yeah,
it's a shame.
So, and I was looking at the cast, like, what else did they do? And it's like, not much. I do love the fact that Ken Foree, who played Peter, kind of like definitely rode the fame. He did some other stuff, but I was surprised to read on his Wikipedia there was a bit where they talk about how he has his own horror festival known as Foree Fest.
Nice.
And there's been 3 of them, apparently a decade ago. But still, it's like, wow, you took that role you did in that one movie and you built a life around it. Well, of course, why not, right?
Yeah.
So, and he has he has the line of the film, which is, when there's no more room in hell, the dead will rise.
Right.
Will walk.
And when there's no more room in an episode, the hosts will shut down.
Will die.
Oh, no. So if you, dear listeners, have your thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us on other social media as well, specifically the places that Andrew and I frequent, which means you can find me on Instagram at dbethelcomics. You can find Andrew on Mastodon at profounddark@dice.camp.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube. There you'll find our show simulcast in YouTube. If you do listen to the show on YouTube, please like and subscribe, or as the kids like to say, ring that bell.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4. Both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music and more at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 Attribution License.
If you'd like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to leave some sort of review, whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. This is an important week, Andrew.
It's why?
Because Lower Decks.
Lower Decks premieres. It will. Yep. It will.
Final season. It has, Andrew. Come on. We are recording this live on Friday, the 25th of October.
This is why they're installing belts in living rooms.
Yep. And so,
I'm sorry. That's such a weird niche. So for those that don't know, right, Lower Decks has always done posters for each season that are like essentially a parody of posters of the Star Trek films, the numbered Star Trek films.
Yeah.
And the one they released, was it like a month ago? It was just like, why are they installing seatbelts in living rooms? It had a picture of a couch with seatbelts, and it said Star Trek 5 or Lower Decks 5, the final season. And I think you actually sent it to me. I was like, what the fuck is this? And I Googled it and found out, like, oh my God, that was a poster for Star Trek 5 in like 1988.
And so, actually, I'm not going to say when we recorded this, but let's just say maybe it was October 23rd, where we had finished, we conveniently watched the season finale of season 4. And so we're ready for season 5. And I'm sad it's going to come to an end.
Right.
What did you think of the first episode?
It was great.
It was great because we were recording this on Friday, the 25th.
We'll certainly talk about it in the future.
Of course.
But it is that thing where it's like, part of me is like, wow, the show was just a fun thing to have. Why would you ever end it?
Right. But that's something that we'll never know.
Yeah.
So until you watch the glory of Star Trek Lower Decks, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
All right. Oh, that was an unofficial clap.
We have to officially clap.
Let's do this. I have filed the paperwork. I did not take notes, but there's general notes, ideas I want to hit. We clapped.
General notes. I love general notes.
Yes, you got your admirable
notes.
You got your admiral notes.
And sorry, I want to, because of some of the backstory, I need to touch my keyboard real quick.
God forbid. Just don't touch that mouse, too.
All right. So
why is everything you own so loud?